The first thing I remember from that night is waking up on my couch with my phone buzzing and a knot in my stomach, already knowing something was off before I even checked the screen. A Slack notification from Theo Caldwell. We should talk about last night. If you've ever had a coworker text you something like that after a company party, you know the exact kind of cold panic I'm talking about. The kind that hits before coffee, before excuses, before you've had time to rewrite events into something safer. Because whatever happened, it wasn't nothing. Let me rewind. I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, the kind that pretends it's chill and modern because there's cold brew on tap and dogs in the office, but still tracks your billable hours down to the minute. I'd been there almost 3 years, long enough to know who to trust and who to keep at arm's length. Theo had been there longer, senior project manager. Calm, competent, annoyingly respected by everyone, including me. He was also straight, or at least that's what everyone assumed, including him as far as I knew. We weren't close, exactly. Friendly in meetings, occasional jokes in the break room. The kind of guy who always remembered your name and asked how your weekend was, then actually listened to the answer. Tall, broad-shouldered, always dressed just a little better than required. Not flashy, just solid. And yeah, I'd noticed him. Of course I had. But noticing a coworker is very different from doing anything about it. Especially when HR exists. So when the company announced the annual corporate retreat, 2 days at a lakeside hotel, open bar, team bonding, I rolled my eyes and packed my bag like I always did. Go. Be social. Don't get drunk enough to ruin your career. That plan lasted maybe 3 hours. The first night was harmless. Group dinner, speeches from leadership, bad jokes, wine refills that came a little too fast. After dessert, someone suggested moving the party down to the hotel bar, and suddenly ties were loosened, heels came off, and people started acting like versions of themselves I barely recognized. Theo ended up next to me at the bar, not intentionally, just naturally. "Did you survive the icebreaker games?" he asked, leaning in so I could hear him over the music. "Barely," I said. "If I ever have to describe my brand as a fruit, again, I'm quitting." He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that made his shoulders shake a little. "I said pomegranate," he admitted. "No idea why," I snorted. "That tracks, actually." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah?" "Yeah, hard to get into. Worth the effort." The look he gave me then. Brief, curious, unreadable. Should have been my warning. We kept talking. About work. About how fake corporate retreats felt. About how neither of us really drank much anymore. Except apparently tonight. One drink turned into two. Two into shots, someone ordered without asking. At some point, the rest of the team faded into the background. Or maybe I did. The last clear group moment I remember was someone dragging a karaoke machine into the bar, and half the department screaming through a bad rendition of an early 2000s pop song. After that, things blurred. I remember stepping outside for air. The lake was dark and still, the hotel lights reflecting off the water like something out of a brochure. I remember Theo following me out, jacket slung over his shoulder. "Too loud in there," he said. "Too everything," I replied. We stood side by side, not touching, not yet, just breathing the same cold night air. "You ever feel like work turns you into a version of yourself you don't recognize?" he asked suddenly. I glanced at him. "All the time." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." That was the moment things shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough. We didn't kiss outside. We didn't even touch. But when he suggested one last drink upstairs, room service instead of the bar, I said yes faster than I should have. His room was on the same floor as mine. That felt important at the time, like it made everything safer. Less risky. It didn't. I remember sitting on the edge of his bed, shoes kicked off, laughing about something stupid. I remember him handing me a glass of whiskey, our fingers brushing for half a second too long. What I don't remember clearly is who leaned in first. I just remember realizing his hand was on my thigh. and that I didn't move it away. The next morning, I woke up alone on my couch with that Slack message waiting for me, and the unsettling certainty that whatever happened after that touch had changed something neither of us could undo. I didn't go back to the office for 2 days after the retreat. Officially, I, quote, worked from home. Unofficially, I spent most of that time replaying the same fragmented memories and wondering which version of events lived in Theo's head. Because here's the thing. I remembered enough to know we crossed a line, just not how far. I remembered his room, the low light from the bedside lamp, sitting closer than coworkers ever should. His voice dropping when he said my name, like it meant something different in that moment. I remembered the bed shifting under us. I remembered heat. Breath too close, a pause where everything could have stopped, and didn't. But the rest? Blurred. Not because I was blacked out, just because some moments hit so hard your brain protects you by smudging the edges. That Slack message stayed unread for a full hour before I finally opened it again, hoping it would somehow change. It didn't. We should talk. About last night. No emojis. No apology. No pretending it hadn't happened. Classic Theo. I typed and deleted about 10 replies before settling on the safest possible option. Yeah, I agree. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Can we grab coffee before work tomorrow? Tomorrow. Before work. That felt intentional. Neutral ground. Public. Professional. Sure, I replied, even though my pulse spiked like I'd just agreed to something dangerous. The cafe across from the office was quiet that morning, mostly freelancers and early commuters. I got there first, ordered a black coffee I barely touched, and sat facing the door like I was waiting for a date, which, yeah, that realization didn't help. Theo walked in exactly on time. He looked normal. Too normal. Same calm posture, same neat hair, same jacket I'd seen him wear 100 times before, except now I noticed things I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. The tension in his jaw. The way his eyes scanned the room before landing on me and staying there half a second longer than necessary. Hey, he said softly. Hey. He ordered his coffee, then sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than any awkward small talk could have. I'm not great at this, he said finally. At mornings? I offered. He huffed a quick laugh, then sobered. At pretending things didn't happen. There it was. My chest tightened. Same. Another pause, longer this time. I don't regret it, he said carefully, but I need to know where your head is, because mine's been loud. That surprised me. Not the words, the honesty. I don't regret it either, I admitted. I'm just trying to figure out what it actually means. Theo nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. I've never done that before, he said. With a guy, with a coworker, with anyone under those circumstances. I held his gaze. Neither have I. He exhaled, shoulders dropping a fraction. Okay, that helps. We talked then. Really talked. About boundaries, about the risk, about how the company wasn't exactly famous for handling messy personal dynamics well. What I don't want, he said, is for this to turn into something we're both pretending didn't matter, or something that messes with your job, or mine. And what do you want? I asked, before I could stop myself. Theo looked at me, expression unreadable. Then he said, quietly, I want to see you again. Not as a mistake, not as a secret we're ashamed of. Just intentionally. My heart did that stupid thing again. Outside of work? He added quickly. No pressure, if that's not what you want. I want that, I said. Too fast. I didn't care. Something shifted between us then. Not relief exactly, more like alignment. We stood to leave a few minutes later, both suddenly aware of time and optics. At the door, Theo hesitated. Dinner? He asked. This weekend? I nodded. Yeah, dinner sounds good. As we walked out separately, him ahead of me, like nothing had changed, I realized something unsettling. The night after the corporate party hadn't ruined our working relationship. It had cracked it open, and whatever was coming next, There was no pretending this was just a one-night thing. Monday morning hit differently after that. Walking into the office, knowing Theo was there, knowing what we'd talked about, what we'd agreed to, made everything feel sharper. The lights were too bright. The coffee too weak. Every interaction felt like it carried subtext only the two of us could hear. I spotted him during the daily stand-up meeting. Same neutral expression, same measured tone. If I hadn't been sitting across from him 3 days earlier, listening to him admit his head had been loud because of me, I never would have guessed a thing. That scared me a little and impressed me. At one point our eyes met, just briefly, no smile, no signal, just recognition. It felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with bodies. We didn't text much that week. A few short messages about logistics. Time, place, nothing flirty. It was deliberate, smart. Still, every notification made my stomach flip. Dinner was Friday night. Not somewhere flashy. Just a quiet restaurant a few neighborhoods away from both our apartments. Neutral territory again. Intentional. I got there first, again, and spent 10 minutes pretending to read the menu while checking the door like an idiot. Theo arrived in a dark sweater and jeans, no work jacket, no corporate armor. He looked more human, less polished, more dangerous. "Hey," he said, smiling this time. "Hey!" We hugged. A real one. Brief but solid. It grounded me. Conversation came easier than I expected. We talked about everything except the retreat at first. Music, travel, how weird it was, realizing how little you know about someone you've worked with for years. At work, he said, I'm always the guy who has it together. I don't really let that crack. Yeah, I replied. I noticed, he smiled. You don't. That landed harder than I expected. By the time food arrived, the distance between us had shrunk without either of us acknowledging it. Our knees brushed under the table. Neither of us moved away. So, I said, pushing my glass aside, can I ask you something kind of personal? Theo nodded. Please. When you said you'd never done that before, I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Was that about me specifically, or about men in general? He didn't answer right away. Took a sip of water, looked at the table, then back at me. Men, he said. You just happened to be the first one I stopped pretending I wasn't curious about? There it was. Not dramatic, not tragic, just honest. I let that sit between us. I've always been good at putting things in boxes, he continued. Work box, life box, desire box I don't open. That night, I didn't want to put it back. Something in his voice told me this wasn't just about attraction. It was about control, about permission. Do you feel weird about it? I asked. No, he said immediately. Then, softer, do you? I thought about it, about the anxiety, the risk, the way my heart jumped when he texted. I feel awake, I said. He smiled at that. After dinner, we walked. No plan, just streets and cool air and the quiet hum of the city at night. At one point, we stopped near a park, standing under a streetlight that cast everything in soft yellow. This is usually the part where I overthink, Theo said. And? I asked. And I don't want to tonight. He looked at me, not asking, not pushing, just waiting. So I leaned in. The kiss was slow, intentional, nothing rushed or hidden. Not the kind of kiss you regret. The kind you remember later and realize it changed the shape of things. When we pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine for a second. This doesn't stay here, he said quietly. At the office. I know, I said, and I'm okay with that. That night didn't end in chaos or drama or crossed lines. It ended with plans. And that's what scared me most of all. The hardest part wasn't seeing Theo after that. It was not seeing him. We went back to the office on Monday, like two people who had never kissed under a streetlight, never admitted anything that couldn't be unsaid. Meetings, emails, Slack threads full of emojis that meant nothing. Except everything meant something now. We were careful, painfully so. No lingering looks, no inside jokes. If anything, we pulled back too far, like we were afraid proximity alone might give us away. It was exhausting. The only place we let ourselves exist, honestly, was outside the building. Texts at night. Short at first, then longer. "You still up?" "Yeah." "Thinking too much?" "Same." We saw each other once that week. Just a walk, no dinner, no drinks. Another neutral choice. It felt almost ridiculous how intentional we were being, like two teenagers sneaking around instead of grown men with careers. But there was a reason for that caution. People notice things. On Thursday, my coworker Jenna cornered me by the coffee machine. "So," she said casually, stirring her cup, "you and Theo seem quieter lately." My stomach dropped. "Do we?" She shrugged. "You used to banter more. Just an observation." "Probably just busy," I said, forcing a shrug of my own. She hummed, unconvinced, but uninterested enough to let it go. That night, I told Theo. Someone asked if we were acting different. He didn't reply right away. When he did, it was just, "We need to talk." Not my favorite sentence. We met at his place this time. First time inside his apartment. It was clean in a way that suggested control more than obsession. Minimalist. Calm. Very him. He poured us drinks we barely touched. "I don't want to hide forever," he said, standing by the window instead of sitting. "But I also don't want this to blow back on you." "On us," I corrected. He looked at me then, really looked. "You're right," he said quietly. We talked logistics, worst-case scenarios. HR policies we'd both read and pretended didn't apply to real life. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it was intimate in a different way. This was trust. Planning. Choosing each other with eyes open. "I'm not asking you to wait," he said at one point. "If this ever feels like too much." "I'm here," I said. "I wouldn't be if I didn't want this." Something softened in him after that. He crossed the room and stood close. No rush. No urgency. Just presence. "This is new for me," he admitted. "Not just you. Letting myself want." I reached for his hand. He didn't hesitate this time. We kissed then, slower than before, deeper. Familiar already. When he pulled back, he smiled in a way I hadn't seen yet. Not careful. Not guarded. Relieved. From that point on, things changed. Not all at once, but steadily. We stopped pretending it was casual. We still kept it professional at work, but outside of it, we became real. Dinners turned into staying over. Conversations stretched late into the night. We learned each other's quiet habits, the things neither of us said out loud to anyone else. And yeah, there were moments of fear, of doubt, of wondering if this was a terrible idea dressed up as something meaningful. But there were also moments when he'd reach for me without thinking, when I'd catch myself smiling at my phone like an idiot, when work felt lighter just knowing he was in the same building, even if we never acknowledged it. One night, weeks later, lying next to each other, Theo said something that stuck with me. "I didn't expect one night to change my life," he said, "but I think it did." I didn't answer right away. Neither of us needed me to. The problem with believing you found a rhythm is that life loves testing it. About a month after the retreat, the company announced a restructuring. New teams, new reporting lines, new pressure, the kind of corporate shakeup that makes everyone pretend to be flexible while quietly panicking about their jobs. Theo and I ended up assigned to the same high-priority account. On paper, it made sense. Our skills complemented each other. In reality, it was a minefield. We found out in a team meeting. The moment our names were listed back to back, I felt it. His tension before I even looked at him. A subtle shift in posture. A controlled inhale. Afterward, he messaged me instead of talking in person. "We need to be extra careful." "I know," I replied. "We can handle it." Could we, though? Working closely meant more meetings, more late nights, more moments where it was just the two of us in a conference room, laptops open, pretending our knees weren't inches apart. The first time it happened, I thought I imagined it. We were reviewing timelines, heads bent over the same screen. He pointed at something, his hand brushing mine. Accidental, but neither of us moved right away. Theo cleared his throat and leaned back. Let's take 5. Professional. Controlled. But when I caught his eye, there was something there. Not desire exactly. Strain. That night, at his place, it finally cracked. This is harder than I expected, he admitted, sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, not being able to react naturally. You're good at restraint, I said gently. He laughed without humor. I've had a lot of practice. I sat beside him, not touching yet. You don't have to be perfect. He turned to me then, eyes searching. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to be the reason you're uncomfortable at work. And I don't want us to pretend we're not real just because the office exists. I said, we didn't solve it that night. We didn't need to. What mattered was that we said it out loud, that we acknowledged the tension instead of letting it rot in silence. The next week was better. Not easier, but clearer. We set rules. No being alone behind closed doors. No late-night work sessions unless someone else was around. Boundaries that felt slightly ridiculous but necessary. Then came the presentation. Big room. Senior leadership. Months of planning distilled into 30 minutes. Theo led it. I supported. We were sharp. In sync. Exactly what the company wanted to see. When it ended, the room filled with applause. Someone clapped Theo on the back. Someone else nodded at me approvingly. On the surface, it was just a win. But when our eyes met across the room, something passed between us. Pride. Relief. A quiet "we did this." That night, walking back to our cars separately like always, he texted me. Come over? I didn't hesitate. At his place, the tension finally broke. Not explosively, but deeply. The kind of closeness that comes from holding something together under pressure. Later, lying side by side, he said, I used to think work was the safest place to keep my life simple. And now? I asked. And now I know it's just a place, he said. Not my whole identity. I turned toward him. Is that scary? He smiled, small and honest. Yeah, but it's also freeing. That was the night I realized this wasn't just about one night after a corporate party. It was about 2 people choosing complexity over comfort. And once you do that, there's no going back. The real shift didn't come with a kiss or a confession. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, buried in an email. Subject line, updated org chart, Q3. I opened it without thinking. Scrolled. Paused. Thea's name was gone from my vertical. Not fired, not moved out, promoted. He was being bumped up to a director role. New responsibilities, broader oversight, fewer day-to-day overlaps with my team. On paper, it was great news. Earned. Long overdue. In reality, my first reaction was complicated relief. I found him later that day in an empty stairwell, one of those quiet, half-forgotten places people use when they don't want to be overheard. You knew? I asked. He nodded. Found out last week. NDA until today. Congratulations, I said, and meant it. Yeah, he replied, exhaling. Also, this changes things. We stood there, not touching, just close enough to feel each other's presence. For us? I asked. For everything, he said honestly. Less risk, less pretending. I searched his face. You sound relieved. I am, he admitted. But I didn't want you to think I was planning an exit, or that this was some way to clean things up. I shook my head. I don't think that. He studied me for a moment, then smiled. Soft, real, good. That night, we didn't celebrate with anything dramatic. No champagne, no grand plans. Just takeout on his couch, legs tangled. The kind of quiet that only exists when you stop bracing for impact. Funny, he said at one point, how one promotion can make me feel less trapped. You don't look trapped, I replied. He glanced at me. That's because of you. Weeks passed. With the new structure, we saw each other less at work. But when we did, there was an ease between us we hadn't had before. No strain, no forced distance. Just two people who knew where they stood. Outside the office, things deepened in ways I hadn't expected. I met his friends. Carefully at first. Casually. No labels, no announcements, just being present. Watching him relax into himself around people who knew him well was grounding. One night, after a few drinks, one of them asked how we'd met. At work, Theo said without hesitation. There was a beat. And? His friend pressed, smiling knowingly. And then at a company retreat, he added, glancing at me. I laughed. That's one way to put it. Later, walking home, I asked, "You okay with that?" With what? With people knowing there's more to the story. He squeezed my hand. I'm okay with people knowing you. That was new. For both of us. Not long after, I realized something else had shifted too. I wasn't anxious anymore. Not about work. Not about being careful. Not about where this was headed. We weren't rushing. We weren't making promises we couldn't keep. But we were choosing each other, consistently, deliberately, without the adrenaline of secrecy to prop it up. One night, lying awake, I asked him something that had been sitting in my chest for a while. Do you ever wish that night hadn't happened? I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then he rolled toward me, propped himself on one elbow. No, he said. I wish I'd been brave sooner, I swallowed. Me too, I admitted. And for the first time, that regret didn't feel heavy. It felt like momentum. The thing about forever is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks, or a dramatic speech, or some perfectly timed confession. It sneaks up on you in the most ordinary moments, when you're not guarding yourself anymore. For me, it happened on a Sunday afternoon. Theo was in my kitchen, sleeves rolled up, arguing with my coffee machine like it had personally offended him. This thing hates me, he muttered, pressing a button again. It's user error, I said from the couch. It works fine when I use it. He shot me a look over his shoulder. So now you're blaming me? Yes, I said easily. I've always blamed you. He laughed, finally getting the machine to cooperate, as he turned around with two mugs, mine exactly the way I liked it. Without asking, I felt it. That quiet click in my chest, the one that said, oh. This isn't temporary. We'd been seeing each other for months by then. No secrets anymore. No pretending. Not loudly public, either. Just honest. Comfortable. Real. Work had settled into something manageable. His role gave him space. Mine gave me confidence. We'd learned how to exist in the same world without shrinking ourselves. That afternoon, we didn't do anything special. We talked about nothing. About a show we were half watching. About a trip we might take someday. About whether my couch was officially too small for two grown men who kept falling asleep on it. At some point, he leaned back, head resting on my shoulder. You ever think about how weird it is, he said, that one night could have gone so differently? All the time, I replied. If either of us had said no, if either of us had been braver sooner, I added. He hummed thoughtfully. I used to think stability meant predictability, same routine, same version of myself. And now? And now I think it means choosing something, and someone, even when it changes you. I turned to look at him. His eyes were closed, relaxed, open in a way he never was when I first met him. I didn't lose anything, he said softly. I gained myself. That was it. That was the moment. Not the corporate party, not the kiss, not the risk. This. Months later, when people asked how we met, we kept it simple. Work, we'd say. Long story, he'd add, smiling. And it was. A story about two colleagues who crossed a line they didn't even realize they'd been walking along for years. About one night that cracked something open, and the patience, fear, honesty, and effort it took to build something real afterward. We didn't pretend it was fate. We knew it was choice. And honestly, that made it better. Because every day after that night, every conversation, every compromise, every quiet Sunday afternoon, we kept choosing each other. And that's how one night after a corporate party didn't ruin our working relationship. It changed our lives forever.